Whether it's Hoosier basketball hysteria, racing at the Indianapolis 500, or remembering music from Hoosier natives who helped shape a generation. Indiana's footprint is deeply embedded in the fabric of the world. Celebrations are being held across the state leading up to December 11th, the day Indiana became part of the United States of America. Good afternoon, I'm Tara Brantley. The countdown to Indiana's 200th birthday is on. Early this year, WANE-TV began working collectively with other news outlets and organizations around the state to dig deep into Hoosier history. For the next half hour, I invite you to join me as we look forward to Indiana's future by celebrating its past and exploring some of the fascinating facts in this place we call the crossroads of America.
WANE-TV is proud to be celebrating Indiana 200 years young. Now here's your host, Tara Brantley.
As Indiana celebrates its bicentennial, news stations around the state are joining in a collaborative effort to highlight what makes Indiana great. WANE-TV is working with stations in South Bend, Evansville, Terre Haute, and Indianapolis to give you a statewide look at Hoosier heritage and achievements. This afternoon, we start in Evansville, honoring one of the first Americans killed in World War I. Shelby Coates from WEVV reflects on the life and legacy of James Gresham.
He grew up as a West Sider.
He attends Centennial School as a young boy.
Mention the name of James Bethel Gresham in Indiana and very few can rattle off all the details of his life.
Quit school to help his mom.
About through 4th grade or so, then he went to work, and at one point working in a furniture factory.
But this small town soldier would grow up to give the ultimate sacrifice, representing the Hoosier state and so many servicemen of World War I.
The newspapers are full of headlines about Gresham's death.
Gresham was born in McLean County, Kentucky, but his mother moved to Evansville, where Gresham would enlist at the age of 21. He would be sent to France during the Great War.
This is the second headstone that was used to mark Gresham's grave.
Evansville Museum Curator of History Tom Longberg cites an early morning raid on November 3, 1917, that ended with the death of Gresham, Merle Hay, and Thomas Enright.
Their first casualties of war. So this certainly had a major impact here and was known across the country when this occurs.
There's no way to confirm exactly how Gresham died, but as the story goes, Gresham offered to switch shifts with someone too cold to stand watch. When the raid took place, he shouted, "Don't shoot, we're Americans." The enemy said, "That's who we're looking for," and shot Gresham between the eyes, making him one of the first noted American casualties of the war.
And that's what he is. He's representative of that. I mean, his sacrifice was great. But equaled by many others.
At the time of Gresham's death, Evansville Mayor Benjamin Bossy organized a massive memorial service at the then new Evansville Coliseum. The community also rallies around Gresham's mother, using donations to build and furnish this home. It still stands today in Garvin Park.
Children were donating pennies and businesses were donating dollars.
Doretha Diefenbach-Hines is a local historian whose research on World War I led her to Gresham. She's now working to share his story with more generations.
There's no memorial at his grave, just a simple government-free tombstone.
Originally, the French would bury Gresham near the battlefield where he died, erecting a monument. 4 years later, his body is returned to Indianapolis.
There's even a bit of debate. Indianapolis might want him buried there in the state capitol, but he is brought back to Evansville. His mother's still living here.
As Longberg tells it, Gresham's body would stay at his mother's home for a few days at her request. His final resting place is at Evansville's Locust Hill Cemetery. Today, discussions continue on how and where to honor Gresham's sacrifice, but historians say there's no debate about his place in Evansville, Indiana, and world history.
He was a symbol of the perils of the Great War. He was a symbol of the boys that came home in flag-covered coffins, and he was a symbol of the sacrifice of the mothers and the families and our nation.
In Evansville, Shelby Coates, 44 News.
A new exhibit that has nothing to do with war is also attracting bicentennial crowds. It mixes the old and the new. 24-hour News 8's David Barris goes inside the Indiana State Museum to give us a look.
Call it art designed to grab your attention. A piece by Indiana-based artist Letitia Bahuyo that will greet you as you enter the Indiana State Museum from the garage.
Oops, come back here.
She calls it Event Horizons.
An event horizon is the point of no return in a black hole or a type of form, like a vortex form. So there's a point of no return where you can't come back.
A work of 12,000 CDs reaching 15 feet into the air. CD art that celebrates Indiana's bicentennial.
The CD I find very particular to Indiana. The first CD pressed in the U.S. was pressed in Terre Haute, and so I find that really important to be able to recognize.
Event Horizons is just one piece of an art show at the Indiana State Museum called 200 Years of Indiana Art, a Cultural Legacy, a history lesson of sorts that is anything but ordinary.
This particular piece, she's created her own space that welcomes all people.
This piece by Anila Aga, a Pakistani-born, now Indiana artist, is called Intersections.
It's not a piece that you are just looking at, but you actually become part of the piece as you walk through the space.
It awakens your senses, and as you'll learn when you tour it, reflects history as told in the artist's unique way.
Well, this is where you enter the show, and this features some of Indiana's earliest artists.
Mark Rushman is the chief curator of fine arts at the Indiana State Museum. He put together the exhibition.
We have the work on this wall over here, representing what we call the pioneer Indiana artists. And this is a piece by Granville Bishop,
which features more than 100 works of art spanning 200 years of Indiana artists. Turns out, art is history.
And it's no more evident than in this exhibition. You know, you start off with the very earliest works, right when we became a state around 1816, and then we work our way through the exhibition up to pieces that were literally made within the last 30 days.
Works like Letitia Bahuyo's Event Horizons, designed to pull you in and show you history as only art and artists can do.
Having this exhibition together in the State Museum, which brings all of those different areas, whether it's natural history, technology, and the arts.
There are a lot of things bottled up here in Indiana worth celebrating. Take, for example, this. Coca-Cola. This is a new version, but the original bottle was made right here in Indiana. News 10's John Swanner in Terre Haute takes us to the birthplace of the bottle.
Welcome to Coke Corridor. You'll find this Coca-Cola collection inside the Vigo County Historical Society's museum at 6th and Washington. And Mary Lee Hagan knows an awful lot about Terre Haute's connection to Coca-Cola.
The Coca-Cola bottle is famous worldwide, and the connection to Terre Haute is the fact that it was actually designed in Terre Haute, Indiana, at the Root Glass Factory in 1915.
Hagan says Coca-Cola actually put on a contest. Chapman Root's company won out. The Root Glass Company made Coca-Cola's iconic bottle in Terre Haute until moving to Florida in the 1950s. The bottle will have a place in Indiana's bicentennial celebration.
We're really proud to report that the Coke bottle is one of the 200 objects in the 200 object exhibit at the Indiana State Museum.
In other words, the state recognizes this bottle's contributions to Indiana's history. It contributed to the area's economy for decades. The glass company at 3rd and Voorhees employed several men for decades making this bottle. Coca-Cola also operated bottling and distribution centers throughout the area. Most of these facilities no longer exist today. Terre Haute hasn't lost all of its Coca-Cola facilities. The building behind me is a distribution center, and you'll find it at 8th Avenue and Lafayette. In the future, look for Terre Haute to take better advantage of its direct connection with the Coca-Cola bottle, branding itself as the birthplace of the bottle, hopefully bringing more visitors to the city where it all began. In Terre Haute, I'm John Swanner, News 10.
The city of South Bend also has something to showcase for the bicentennial. You'll see it coming up. Plus, basketball, not the game, but where it's played. Coming up, the history of Hoosier hardwood.
Celebrating Indiana 200 years young continues.
Since 1928, Fort Wayne's Embassy Theater has been attracting people who love live shows. But years before the Embassy opened, a theater less than 2 hours away was all the rage. Fox 28's Tom Powell goes on stage in South Bend at the Morris Theater, a place that was once called the Palace.
On performance nights, you might hear the thrilling sounds of the South Bend Symphony Orchestra or the laughter of the crowd when a comedian is on stage. But on a quiet afternoon, when the Morris Center for the Performing Arts is empty,
this is the Egyptian egg and dart pattern.
You can really take time to learn about its history. Mary Ellen Smith takes us back to the 1920s when the theater was built. Back then, it was called the Palace Theater.
They wanted to give people feeling as if they were taking a trip to Europe.
You can still see those touches today.
This is a Greek key pattern.
Both in the lobby.
The cameo ladies, that's from France. Our rotunda area up above, that's a pattern after the Palace of Versailles in France.
And once you take your seat.
Up in the alcoves, we have the griffins from Greek mythology.
Early on, it would have cost you just 20 cents to enjoy a new vaudeville act. There were silent films, and later in 1940,
those fighting sons of old Notre Dame charging across the screen in a roaring blaze of triumph.
The world premiere of Newt Rockne All-American, starring Ronald Reagan. But by 1959, New Choices in Entertainment nearly closed the curtain on this live venue for good.
The theater attendance had dropped down because everyone was home watching the new black and white televisions.
That's when philanthropist Ella Morris stepped in. She bought the theater, saved it from the wrecking ball, and then turned around and sold it to the city of South Bend for $1.
Thank goodness.
Yes, because South Bend had lost a couple different theaters through the years, and so the Morris was saved.
And now every show that comes through here entertains audiences in a place that was renamed in Morris's honor.
Live on stage at the Morris Performing Arts Center.
The theater underwent a major $17 million renovation at the turn of this century. There are new dressing rooms and a new fly space to accommodate those big-budget Broadway shows. Everything was fixed up, down to the wire on the original chandeliers. But there is one thing that wasn't disturbed.
So, according to old stagehand tradition, all old theaters like this have ghosts. This is the stage light. It's on 24 hours a day, and depending on who you talk to, it's either to light the way for the spirits or to keep the ghosts away.
But they don't seem to get in the way of attracting big-name acts and loyal fans who keep coming back to this award-winning venue.
We get rave reviews from people, the shows and tours coming through the theater.
In South Bend, Tom Powell, Fox 28 News.
Other Hoosier buildings are also getting a lot of attention during the bicentennial, like gymnasiums, filled with history in a state that cherishes the hard court and the game played on it for more than 120 years. This afternoon, 24-hour News 8's Phil Sanchez and photojournalist Sean Pierce introduce you to a pair of men who are telling hard court history, one photograph at a time.
Here, you need a ticket, though. Let me give you yours.
At Jasper High School, sectional basketball drama unfolding inside the gymnasium. The stands packed with screaming fans. South Spencer versus Forest Park.
It's just a lot of somebody's waiting to bust up, just get after it.
On the line, a regional bid. And literally behind the lines, a pair of photographers.
For us, it's not about the play of the moment.
Michael Keating has been taking pictures for decades. The retired newspaper photographer now works alongside his friend, Chris Smith.
We've photographed these places and we've seen what value they have in their communities.
For the past several years, they've traveled the state, over 10,000 miles long.
And these are moments in time.
And more than 100 gymnasiums photographed.
If there's a religion in Indiana, it's basketball. And if there's a place where that religion is practiced, it's in the gymnasiums.
And each gym has its own story.
A timeout called by South Spencer.
Every shot I do is kind of thought out and what's gonna show off the gym and then what's gonna occur in this kind of framework.
Chris came up with the idea after finding an old picture of his father in high school.
I could see the gym around it. I started wonder where that gym was, what happened to these guys. And so I thought, well, maybe it'd be fun to go ahead and try to photograph some old gyms.
And just like that, the Hoosier Hardwood Project was born.
even in the newest places, history is made every night. History is made because people are making memories.
And on this night, memories were definitely made. From the crowd to the floor, the hugs and the high fives, moments that turn into memories.
I think the biggest payoff or responsibility I feel is a lot of times telling these people's story.
Stories lived and then told through a snapshot in time. Tears of sadness and tears of joy.
It's got a happy ending, a sad ending, a beginning, middle, and end. Every good story. It's got a hero, maybe a villain too.
It's the same story repeated over and over for years, right?
Indiana basketball.
Some of their work is currently on display at the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, but you can see the finished project this fall. Their work will be featured in an exhibit at the Indiana Historical Society. Phil Sanchez, 24-Hour News 8.
Basketball isn't the only thing Indiana is known for. When we come back, its most notorious native son.
Now, here's more celebrating Indiana 200 years young with your host, Tara Brantley.
Even with all the great things Indiana is known for, there is also a darker side. One of the most dangerous gangsters in U.S. history was Hoosier, born and raised. Farron Fransak from Fox 28 in South Bend takes a look at the life and the criminal escapades of John Dillinger.
I don't know anything about you.
I was raised on a farm in Mooresville, Indiana. My mama died when I was 3. I liked baseball, movies, fast cars, whiskey, and you. What else you need to know?
There's a lot about John Dillinger that many Hoosiers don't know. Now, we see one interpretation by Johnny Depp in the Hollywood hit Public Enemies.
What is it exactly you do for a living?
John Dillinger robbed banks.
You'll find the true history of the Hoosier hoodlum here in the basement of the Lake County Courthouse in Crown Point, Indiana.
We hear the most when people come through here is that they need to come back because they didn't allot enough time because there's so much information.
I'm John Dillinger's father.
On a farm near Indianapolis, you could say Johnny Jr. was born with a criminal mind. From his high school gang, the Dirty Dozen, to stealing a car because his father refused to let him drive the family one, prison for Dillinger was only a matter of time. Just 60 miles east of Chicago is the Indiana State Penitentiary in Michigan City. Dillinger was sentenced to 10 years behind bars here for a petty theft gone bad. When released at nearly age 31, Dillinger came out of jail with a gang and 10 years of education and breaking the law. They hit the ground running in 1933, holding up banks all over Indiana.
Can be stopped, and it will be stopped.
President Franklin Roosevelt convinced Congress to expand federal jurisdiction in the war against crime.
The FBI wouldn't exist to this day as it does if it weren't for John Dillinger and the crimes he committed.
With the help of the media, the first list of public enemies was circulated. Dillinger had just robbed a bank in East Chicago, Indiana, and was accused of killing a police officer.
John Dillinger was named the first ever public enemy #1.
Dillinger and his gang needed a break, but were met by police in Tucson, Arizona. The first state to demand Dillinger's return, Indiana. He was one of the first prisoners to be transported by plane to meet the sheriff at the Crown Point jail, where the picture that ruined careers was taken.
This was the prosecutor who was going to run for office, and it looks like they're all chummy.
Dillinger was known to be very charming and knew photographers would be there.
They even say that he put his finger in the shape of a gun to tell his gang to get a gun into the jail.
The jail had new technology at the time. A guard pulled one lever that closed all of the cell doors. It was touted as escape-proof.
The sheriff's house and the jail were connected.
Dillinger, taking a guard hostage with a wooden gun carved from a washboard, was shown the way out.
Open up!
A prison break so infamous.
It's Sheriff Lillian Holly's personal car.
Hollywood made the trip just to recreate it.
For example, in the Crown Point jail, where he escaped, I escaped exactly the way he did. through all those doors.
After breaking out of the Crown Point jail, Dillinger forms a new gang and goes back to what he does best, robbing banks. Now, they first went north to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, stealing nearly 50 grand. Then it was south to Iowa, then east to Ohio. But the last bank Dillinger robbed was 8 days after his birthday, June 30th, 1934, in South Bend, Indiana. The gang pulled up in front of Merchants National Bank at 229 South Michigan Street. A nearby police officer at the corner directing traffic heard the commotion and jumped into action, but was shot and killed. 5 others were injured, but 1 month later,
When I learned he was Dillinger, I knew he had been killing without mercy.
Dillinger was given up by a madam, an illegal immigrant wanting amnesty. FBI agents shot Dillinger on July 22nd, 1934, outside Chicago's Biograph Theater. The pants Dillinger was wearing when he died, along with his original tombstone, are the final scene at Dillinger's museum.
The conclusion is crime doesn't pay. Dillinger did not survive.
Dillinger made his mark as a ruthless gangster, but what you may not know is that he was an avid baseball fan. Just where did professional baseball get its start? Well, the very first game was played right here in the Hoosier State. Coming up, America's favorite pastime and its Summit City connection.
Celebrating Indiana 200 years young continues.
When people visit Fort Wayne's Parkview Field in the heart of the city, they may not realize this city is home base for America's favorite pastime. The very first professional baseball game was played right here in Fort Wayne. The crack of the bat resonates from Parkview Field in downtown as the Tin Caps get on base. Mike Maas is the radio voice of minor league baseball in the fort.
The count goes to 2 balls and a strike. This is my 14th year of being able to broadcast either Wizards or Tin Caps baseball.
But long before the Tin Caps and the Wizards who came before them, there were the Fort Wayne Kikiangas.
The game itself is really the same.
Baseball enthusiast and author Chad Gramling's book, Baseball in Fort Wayne, documents how league play as we know it began in the fort some 145 years ago.
The first professional league baseball game was played on May 5th, 1871, in Fort Wayne. That's without question.
In that game, the Fort Wayne Kikiangas took on the Cleveland Forest Cities, winning 2-0. A write-up in the Fort Wayne Daily Gazette preserved that first professional league game, and a dispatch was sent to the New York Herald.
The Babe was king of the early Yankees.
In the decades that followed, legends were born as Major League Baseball became America's favorite pastime.
And Elston Howard blasts a home run.
But professional teams in the fort fizzled, and it took years for Fort Wayne baseball to get back on base.
The first Fort Wayne Wizards game took place on April 19th, 1993. More than 6,000 fans packed the castle on a chilly, damp evening.
The castle, commonly known as Memorial Stadium, meant professional baseball was back in the fort.
The Wizards were a new entity. When they came to Fort Wayne in 1993, it was the first time that Fort Wayne had minor league professional baseball since 1948.
Eventually, Memorial Stadium was demolished to make way for a new stadium downtown, Parkview Field, and the Wizards became the Tin Caps.
We opened in April of 2009.
And that same year, the Tin Caps were crowned Midwest League champions. Tin Caps president Mike Nutter.
We've helped develop 145 or so players to go on to the major leagues. We're in the 8th season, and it's been amazing. When we moved from Memorial Stadium to Parkview Field, it was a game changer for downtown development, but also for baseball. And fans and crowds have improved incredibly, and hopefully it's helped spur on a lot of this other economic development in downtown Fort Wayne.
It's been voted the best ballpark in minor league baseball for the last 5 years. Fans love it.
The history here is amazing.
And to celebrate that history, which is part of Indiana's bicentennial, the Tin Caps will suit up in something a little different for one day next month.
On July 29th, we are wearing special endorsed legacy jerseys for the bicentennial. They're awesome. It pays tribute to the 200-year history of our great state. And then we're going to auction them off for charity.
Fort Wayne, a city that launched professional baseball, a game whose legacy Indiana composer Albert von Tilzer captured in song.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd.
So make sure you mark your calendar for Friday, July 29th to head on out here to Parkview Field to help the Tin Caps celebrate Indiana's bicentennial. As part of our celebration and commitment to you, we'll have 2 more bicentennial programs leading up to the big day, December 11th, when Indiana turns 200 years old. Thanks for joining us for Celebrating Indiana 200 Years Young. I'm Tara Brantley.